I'm sitting here with Jameeka Taliva. Am I saying that right, Jameeka?
That's correct. You got it.
And Jameeka, good. And Jameeka was part of a facilitator for a workshop today that had to do with education. One of the concerns that I'd like to bring up with Jameeka is the idea that the next generation of leaders have already begun to sort of identify themselves. And we have seen in the past couple of decades a way of describing generational change with letters. For instance, there was the Generation Xers, which described a mindset and an age group of people who were coming into the information age. And then there was the Generation Y. And now, I believe, I'm not sure if it's you guys.
Z. I'm actually on the border of Generation X and Y because I was born in 1980, and so depending on who you ask, I'm Generation X or Generation Y.
Okay.
And then Generation Z is everyone born after 1986.
My goodness.
So that's not me.
That's fairly recent. Those are the teenagers, and as they come into their maturity, one of the concerns I have is what's the next generation going to be?
Right.
What are they going to be looking like?
And even for me, I think with the Generation Z, they're 24, 25 years old now. And so I think even for me, it definitely is a difference in how we communicate. I was born into a technology age, into an information technology age, and everywhere I went, we always had a computer. But this generation, they always had a computer, but they also always had video games. And so I think that their communication skills are sometimes lacking because maybe they sat in front of the video games too much. They didn't foster those intercultural communication skills that are necessary to succeed in the world today. So even for me, I'm finding that the newer generation is a little bit harder to communicate with.
Isn't that something?
And I know now what the baby boomers see in us. I can see some of the things in the generations behind me that the baby boomers see in us. And that, we always have our Blackberries out. We don't really want to talk to you on the phone. We want to communicate through email versus have a conversation. And now I can see some of the challenges with that for the other generations because I see them in the generation behind me as well.
Well, and you're saying what you can see in them, and one would hope that there would be a growing, not always sort of internalized.
You learn from it. You learn from it because when I left the Navy and I started at Lockheed Martin, my boss would always tell me, "Well, can you please just come down here and tell me what's going on?" And I would say, "No, I want you to read your email." And I sent you an email yesterday, and can you please read it? And I really didn't want to have a conversation with him. But what I realized is that that's not always the most effective way to build a relationship. You have to find a way to have something in common with the people that you work with. I think it definitely fosters a better work environment when you have that. And sometimes the only way to do that is to have a conversation, an in-person, face-to-face conversation so that you can establish that relationship. And I think that's something that Generation X, Y, and Z are all missing.
Well, it's so wonderful to get someone, a young woman like you, and I've already heard great praise.
Thank you.
Of recognition that you have specific skills. And just sitting here with our audience today, we can tell that you're quite verbal, you're extremely articulate, you're well educated, you're lovely, and that's a combination of a whole bunch of things: posture and attitude and looking me in the eye. What do you want to say to the next generation of Generation Z? What do you think they're going to need? Now, you've talked about being able to have a conversation with someone, but are you saying that, does that mean they should put away video games or get rid of their television or only do texting, or what would you recommend to the next generation?
I don't think that there is a new way to do things that are effective. If you have a best practice, it's a best practice for a reason. Communication, communication, communication. Now, how you do that, I think, is a balancing act between the two. I think, yes, there are ways to incorporate technology into your communication, but I think that there is no substitute for a phone call or an in-person visit. And I think that that's something that for the baby boomer generation, they have Blackberries on their hips now too.
Right.
And
that's
so
right.
I think that as they have made that step towards us, we have to also take those steps towards them to ensure that both generations find a middle ground. So there is no new trick to the trade. Communication is still the key to building successful relationships.